Hello everyone, my name's Connor Wakefield and I'm the Construction Solutions Sales Manager here at Man Machine. I'm joined today by Graham Roper. Graham, thank you for joining us. And Graham's very kindly agreed to come down and tell us a bit about his experience in implementing the Autodesk Construction Cloud within Briggs Forrester. A little bit about myself. I'm the Construction Solutions Sales Manager, so I look after all of our customers who are looking at the digital platform Autodesk Construction Cloud, helping to understand the benefits, the problems that they already seen from their software, and really help them implement these digital technologies to find some benefits for their business. Graham's kindly agreed to take us through his experiences at Briggs Forrester, who have recently implemented Autodesk Construction Cloud. And I thought it would be best to start, Graham, if you could tell us a little bit about what Briggs Forrester do and really what your role is within the business.
Briggs Forrester are a building services contractor. As a group, we are split into 4 separate businesses. We have Briggs Forrester Living, who are primarily focused on high-rise residential and housing. We have engineering services, who deal with most of the commercial building services installations. We have special projects, who deal with smaller and sometimes more complex projects, and then we have our maintenance division, who are beyond that, they do planned preventative maintenance.
Great. And what's your role with Briggs Forrester, and which group do you sit in?
I sit within engineering services, but I do work with other parts of the group. My role now is digitalisation and innovation manager. I started at Briggs Forrester nearly 4 years ago now as the national BIM manager, so primarily looking at BIM implementation, efficiency gains through that. My role has grown and moved on to looking at other digital tools, digitalisation, implementation of BIM 360 and AEC currently.
Great. And I suppose within Briggs Forrester Engineering, I know that there's a vast amount of different divisions from design and installation, but could you just tell us a bit about how that looks within the business?
Yeah, so we have a pre-construction department, we have operations, and then aftercare as well. And within those, they're split down into separate teams. So in pre-construction, we have like estimating functions, design. We do commissionability studies, pre-construction reviews, and things like that. Operations deals with mainly the installation side of things. We have like commercial and procurement. They oversee and work on multiple departments, and then obviously we have our like BIM and design, which again they sit across multiple different parts of things. And then aftercare, so we don't just look at handing a building over. We like to take the customers into using the building and making sure that it's suitable for their needs after handover.
And for Briggs Forrester, what's the size of the business? How many staff do you have?
So we currently have around 500 staff. That goes up and down depending on the projects. It's a fairly even split between ourselves and Living. So engineering services will deliver more projects over a year, but Living will deliver fewer but kind of higher value, bigger projects due to the nature of the projects they work on.
I suppose first and foremost, when you joined Briggs Forrester, what did your design and build process look like? What tools did you use? How were you actually managing all of that data?
Like a lot of the construction industry, we were and still are to some degree very traditional in the way that we approach things. I still remember walking in on my first day and being quite shocked at the piles of paper, literally hundreds and hundreds of drawings rolled up on desks, lots of drawing boards everywhere. We still have those drawing boards, we still use a lot of paper, but we would take a typical design package or a package of, what do I want to say? Tender package is what I'm looking for. We would take a tender package. Quite often we would print all of that information out, we would print all of the drawings out, we would print all of the specifications out, the contracts out. They would get read, they would get marked up, stickers put in, post-it notes and things like that. Our estimating teams would go through and hand mark and hand count, measure on every single drawing, count that. So dealing with the change where we get tender addendum in, that obviously becomes difficult. That process has to go through again. Managing and understanding what has changed is very difficult. We would do design reviews, buildability reviews, commissioning reviews on that tender information. If we were successful and won the project, our design teams would then start. They would use tools like overcame. We were using Revit, AutoCAD, hand sketches. People were using hand markups and doing like long form hand calculations for ventilation. So there was a whole mishmash and mix of a little bit of technology, the traditional tools, and I guess it's not different in a lot of places. Managing a lot of information is difficult. A lot of it, especially when you've got larger projects with hundreds of drawings, maybe thousands of drawings in some instances, hundreds of calculations and documents. So there was a little bit of, we would use tools like MagicCAD, for example, for doing lighting calculations. So that was kind of the first real kind of efficiency saving we had, where we would take the Revit models out to a lighting calculation tool and then bring that back in. So there's a little bit of automation there, but a lot of it was a designer would do a calculation, they would mark that up on a drawing, a CAD technician or a Revit technician would then draw that or model that up. So,
and it's certainly the challenge that a lot of building services companies have, just lots of different tools that specialise in things, and there's lots of different file formats and so on, isn't there? So I guess when it comes to then obviously storing and managing that data, how were you doing that? Was it server-based or?
It's just server-based, so we have a traditional folder structure based on a server, permissions were all server-based, access was kind of limited to the department you worked in, so we had estimating information lived in estimating, where the design team might not have access to that, and then we had a design folder where certain people didn't have access to that. You only got access to the CAD folder if you had a CAD license. So we had a lot of duplication, we had a lot of printed drawings sat around because of that. We had a lot of information saved in different areas. Once somebody had got hold of it, they then kind of squirreled it away and had access. So there was a lot of potential for working on out-of-date information. It wasn't the most efficient way of storing information, and a lot of the folder structure that we had was based on old paper folders and box files saved in filing cabinets.
And how did that translate to the actual on-site capabilities? Is that exactly the same, very sort of, I suppose, traditional in the way that you were constructed?
Yeah, it was like that. So again, lots of drawings were printed, lived on hangers and clips in inside offices or out on site. So having access to the latest information is always a concern for people. We're lucky that we have some very good document controllers that would keep those things up to date, but once information is printed and out on site, it can be very difficult to control, and very difficult for our subcontractors and supply chain to also know that they're working on the latest information.
Absolutely. And I suppose what were some of the biggest challenges then with that way? I appreciate you told us a bit around the way you were working and that you understood that the way that was possibly a bit backwards or traditional, so to speak. But what were some of the major problems that you were having, and were there any cost implications because of that were affecting the business?
It's very difficult to put a specific cost implication on these things. However, yes, there will have been access to information was an issue. Knowing with certainty that you were working on the right information or the right drawing specification was always a concern. Understanding the changes, so where we were getting design changes or where we were getting the building would change from an architecture point of view, understanding the implications of that was always a challenge. That's both a time and a cost implication to it. Just finding something on a server somewhere is challenging, and if that takes 5 minutes, there's a cost to that. When you're working on projects, like I say, with some of them with upwards of 10,000 or more drawings, documents, every time you have to go and find a piece of information, it costs time and money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting. I'm certain we'll come back to that one. I suppose from my side then, what did change when you came in? Obviously there's a number of problems there, but why hadn't any change happened originally? What changed within the business to spark this kind of digital transformation?
There was a number of things that changed. So obviously, we were a successful business. We were expanding. We were growing. We were making money. So why fix something that's not broken, if you like? So there wasn't particularly a need to change at that point. I came in, my role was to try to, how can we be more efficient at using Revit, for example, and we were pretty good at that. There wasn't an awful lot of room in there, but I saw those challenges that we've just discussed about finding information, about reviewing information, and so I started to explore options around that. And at the same time, other people in the business were having similar conversations, particularly our design managers and the BIM managers in the regions, and the industry was changing. So our directors would go to events or speak to people within the industry at their level, and are you doing this? What's the BIM? What's digitalization? What tools are you using? So the appetite for change came from a number of different places. Then obviously COVID struck, which I think forced a lot of the industry to think about how not only how people work, but where they worked. Having access to information that's sitting on a server in an office is really difficult when you've got a team that's distributed potentially anywhere in the country, sometimes in the world, in some businesses. So that really then forced us to start to think about the tools that we were using, where we were storing information, and how people were given or had access to that information.
What factors did you actually consider when choosing a accommodating environment for the business?
There's a number of factors that we considered, and we looked at a number of solutions. So obviously cost is a big one. Wider market usage, you decide the VHS Betamax, you don't want to go down the wrong solution. So we looked at what other similar companies were using in the construction industry, ease of use, availability of support. They were the major things that we were looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And what did you choose I suppose at the time? What was it that you actually selected?
At the time, we chose BIM 360 as our product. One of the major components that we needed was the ability to host Revit models in the cloud and have access to those Revit models readily available.
Especially during COVID, right?
Especially during COVID, right? Yes, that was one of the big drivers to take us forward. So BIM 360 was really the only solution at the time that could host shared Revit models. So a lot of the solutions could save a Revit model in there, or one person could work in it. But obviously we had teams that were multiple people working on them, and then COVID came along, so they needed to have access all over the country. So that was critical.
Absolutely, and I suppose moving on from there, I know it was a little bit of time before we then started to look outside of the design team only. Yeah. So I suppose what was the next steps for you as a business? What did you actually look at after that? And why, I suppose, why as well?
So I looked at a number of solutions, and then I wrote a business case along with a colleague to trial BIM 360 on a project. That was accepted by the business. The premise of that was to look at finding documents, ease of finding them, save time, and then reviews. How quickly were we able to review documents, and not only the speed of them, but keeping track of that for our auditing purposes.
And you mentioned around the time you spent looking and this time saved there. Did you actually end up understanding how much time you're potentially saving, roughly?
Yeah, so we did some studies on so how long we were taking to open and synchronize Revit model to start with. So that was around BIM 360 design and the implementation of that, and then also simply finding a drawing. How long it would take then to do a review, and they were the two things that we worked out our return on investment calculations on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose after that, then I know we spent a bit of time refining that process and going through implementation. What was the next step? In terms of you as a business, what did you see as the next high value kind of implementation or area to focus on as a business?
Yeah, so once we run through the pilot project that we selected, and throughout that we had a number of conversations with the project team and likes of yourselves about how things were going and where. So we made some changes. We reviewed the processes that we were using, and the next thing from there is then to start to try and roll out on multiple projects, which we have done. We did over the first year. We looked into cloud hosting all of our Revit models, which COVID kind of forced our hand a little bit with that. And then it was picking projects that were suitable for running various elements of docs, so running issues, running reviews through those processes. What we did was we took small chunks of the software and the solution and found suitable projects to roll those out on rather than trying to roll it out throughout the whole company in one hit.
Absolutely, and I suppose that takes a lot of director level support, right? So what from your side, why did they see that this was something that was required as a business? You know, was it a case of project wins and trying to increase the bottom line, or is there a particular reason that they really sponsored this for you?
Yeah, there's always if you can say we're going to increase the bottom line, it's a win for everybody. They could see the potential that was there. So we ran the pilot project. No pilot project is ever perfect, but we were able to demonstrate a proof of concept worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Initially on that pilot project, there was a little bit of teething troubles. There was grumbling, complaints, why is it my project, and so on. But very quickly, the people working on that project were able to see the value in the solution and see how it could be taken forward. One key time I remember personally is I was walking through the office and one of the designers at the time came over and said, I've got so much work to do. This BIM 360 it's killing me. It's ruining. I haven't got time to do anything. So, what do you mean? He says, well, I've got all these reviews to do. I was like, fantastic. I said, what do you mean fantastic? And so I was like, well, I've got all these reviews to do. I haven't got time to do them. But do you not have to review those documents anyways? Of course. So we were able to use the reviews part of BIM 360 docs to demonstrate how much work that individual had to do. We could then get him support and highlight. So for him, it was a complaint, and he'd been complaining to other people about it. However, we were able to turn that into a positive and just use it to demonstrate how much work was involved and the sheer number of documents and drawings that individual was having to review.
So you went through that pilot process. Yep. Obviously a success, which is great. What was next? So what was the next stage? Was it, obviously there was a lot of change around that time.
There's a lot of change.
And the tool changing itself. So what was the next step for you guys?
So the next stage, we had to then decide whether we were going to stick with BIM 360 or ACC. I think ACC was released as a tool about a week before we started to buy new licenses. So we had the decision, do we stick with BIM 360 or ACC? At the time, we chose to stick with BIM 360 because it was a more mature tool. We understood it. We knew how we could implement that across a wider range of projects. It was then getting more of the business on board. So we put a team together there was a couple of directors, myself, and a couple of colleagues that were responsible for driving implementation across the business. In tandem with that, we started to look at the whole business process, how we go from taking a tender in to estimate to handing over the building and into aftercare. We're still going through that at the minute. It's a long process of trying to evaluate where you can cut out waste in your business, and there's a resistance to change in that sometimes. So we've got a group of 10 heads of department, if you like, that are part of a team that are looking at the process, not necessarily the technology, but how can they make the process of delivering their part of the job better. And then supplementary to that, myself and another couple of colleagues are then looking at technology solutions. So in terms of director level support, we have full buy-in from our board and from our directors. There were obviously questions at the start. It's expensive. There's a lot of money, and particularly over the last 12 months, 18 months with COVID, things going on in Ukraine, there's been a lot of pressure on the construction industry with rising costs and things to try to save money where we can. You were involved in a lot of those conversations we've had in proving that, with potential for return on investment. So we went through all of that. Initially, after the pilot project, we purchased a number of licenses based on a planned rollout. Mm-hmm. And that was based over 3 years. So we had a plan, region by region, project by project, training requirements, which bits of BIM 360, which modules people would use and be trained on.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, we went through that process, and then there was a big change in the way that Autodesk actually managed the BIM 360, transformed into the Autodesk Construction Cloud with Docs, with BIM Collaborate, with Build, which I know was a big game changer for what we were looking to do. And I think from my perspective, that really disrupted that 3 year process. Either both positively and negatively around those conversations. But I guess obviously with that change, why did you decide to sort of fast track that process into Autodesk Build and actually start utilising that on more projects as you went along? And why did you move from BIM 360 to Build, I suppose?
Okay, so as with everything, there were a number of reasons. So our planned rollout, from my point of view, went better than expected. We had organic growth. More people wanted to use it. Once they'd seen the benefits in their projects, they wanted to use it on the next project. Other project teams had seen it used on theirs. Why can I have it on my project now, basically? So I think we had something like 60 licenses initially that we planned to have a small number on each project. It very quickly became apparent that was not going to be enough, and managing those licenses was going to be a challenge. So I think it was maybe 18 months into the 3-year period, we started to discuss about we need more licenses and what were the options for that. Many of those discussions were with myself. So this is where we started to say, well, if we're going to move and we need an enterprise agreement for either docs or build, what's the best solution? Is now a good time to move to ACC? Is the product mature enough at that? So between having conversations with yourselves and Autodesk, we made that decision.
And I remember quite vividly that it was actually the project teams coming to you saying, we want more licenses, we want to use this software, which I suppose goes hand in hand with the way that you actually look to upskill and bring that knowledge across the business as well. I recall we did a lot of sessions with project teams across the UK, and sort of again they were calls that normally started, why are we doing this? We're so used to doing this. And I remember a lot of interesting questions during those calls. And fundamentally, by the end, most people were now thinking, well, this is great. This is exactly what we need. It has everything in one place. So I guess, we've spoken a bit around, the why you sort of selected the tool. I suppose, how did you go about implementing it, across the business? We've said the pilot process was a success, and that fundamentally, by doing these sessions, there was some buy-in from the stakeholders. But how did you actually then transform that into real-life projects within the business?
So we did the pilot project. We learned from that. We asked the project team, what would you change? What would you do differently? We then went away and we developed a solution for that. Part of the team that we put together for the rollout of BIM 360, as it was, included our national planning director. So we very carefully planned the rollout, who was doing what, which projects we were going to be involved, how we were going to train those, and which elements of the software we were going to use on that. So at that point, we then said all Revit models live on the cloud. That is that. And then that obviously then drives, drawings, PDFs of drawings can all live in there. So then on a project by project basis, we would sit with the project team and decide which elements we were going to implement, so we could learn from each stage of that process, which leads us to where we got to with the ACC, the Build Unlimited package. So from that point of view, we then started again with our plan. We created a new rollout plan. As we were,
which was a good thing, right? It was
absolutely.
From the top down, it was
absolutely.
We're fully committing to this software. And now we need to really look at how we supercharge this investment that we've made into all these projects to help benefit.
Yeah, previous to that, we were having to hold back. We didn't have the licenses to roll out at the speed that we needed to, which was, again, that's a double-edged sword. We were able to develop and think about how we were going to do these things rather than just panicking and rolling it out on projects as ad hoc, if you like. So once we'd gone through the process of again proving the value, in terms, it's not just in terms of the cost. It's reduction in risk and things like that to the projects. We were able to demonstrate that to our board, and from then we redeveloped didn't redevelop a plan. We came up with a completely new plan with the ambition to train everybody in the business. So we're looking at somewhere in our part of the business around 300 people. How we would train them, how we would then involve each individual department. The estimators have got a very different set of requirements to the commercial teams, for example, or the operations team. So we've had a real good think, and we're very conscious about not everybody needs the same training, not everybody has the same requirements. So it was about engagement with those guys, and now we're going around the country. We'll do sessions where we'll sit in an office for a day and then just do 4 training sessions just on the basics of docs, for example, with those people. And then when we need to, we'll go to site. So we will do build training on forms and issues with the site teams. We will do training on specifics of reviews for the commercial team or procurement team based on their specific needs. So it's really about developing that plan and then having the support of your directors. So when I go to an office to say today we're doing training, they know they've got to do it.
And I guess that flows really nicely into one of the questions that we don't want to beat around the bush with the construction cloud. As with any change to a business, there's always going to be challenges and problems, and you've spoken really nicely around how you've learned from a number of mistakes. And I guess one of the big questions is, what challenges did you face? What were the biggest challenges, really? Was there things that, days where you thought this isn't going to happen, or there's
absolutely
problems? And could you just tell us a bit about those?
So my biggest challenge was the initial lack of licensing. We thought when our initial purchase of licenses, that would be fine. We didn't expect the rollout to go quite as well as it did. So that for me, that was the biggest challenge. And obviously with challenging marketing conditions, this is never going to happen was around that.
Was there any problem departments or teams?
There's one or two. Yeah, it's not necessarily a department. That's individuals and lots of people. We have got people in our business that have worked in the business for 40 years. They've worked in a successful business that they've seen it grow from like a small business in Northampton to one of the biggest businesses of our type in the country. So I can understand why do we need to change. We've been successful at what we do. So those are the challenges that you've got to deal with. There's like an entire departmental challenges. You've got different regions that work in different sort of sectors, different size projects. And as we spoke about there, each department's got its own unique challenges, but they all have to work as a team. And then you start to bring in supply chain, subcontractors, working with architects, working with other consultants and other contractors. Sometimes we are one of two people, M&E contracts on a project. So trying to get all of that technology together and our solution and make it work on a number of levels is a challenge. But like I said, once we've got the director buying and now they are fully bought into it, it makes.
And it's not just a case of telling them that they're using this. It's education, it's understanding, and also essentially speaking with other people within the team and those guys understanding how you benefited other teams, so that when it comes to actually pushing it within this area, they already understand the benefits that other people have seen, isn't it?
And that's what we do when we go around doing training. We will not just show them which buttons to press in which order. We will demonstrate how it's being used on projects. We will demonstrate how other teams have used it, and how to get the best out of it, not just this is where you put your drawings on, this is where you put a contract, for example.
Yes, what's the benefit?
What's the benefit to the individual? Yes, so we've been able to demonstrate, we can remove waste, what's the word I'm looking for? Process, for example. So sometimes we were creating trackers or we were creating documents in Excel to track things. Through use of issues, we can remove that, and the information that the guys need is all in one place. It's not scattered around a filing system, or it's not printed out in a folder on the site, for example. It's all in one place where it's easily accessible to somebody, whether they're sat in the office or they're sat in a site cabin or even outside.
So, Graham, in terms of the Autodesk Construction Cloud, what products do you actually have as a business?
So now we have BIM Collaborate Pro. We have a number of licenses of BIM Collaborate Pro, and we have Build Unlimited. So we did have, in the old world, BIM 360 Design, BIM 360 Docs, and BIM 360 Build. We still use some of those legacy products, but we are now primarily on BIM Collaborate Pro Build.
And all of that sits upon the Autodesk Docs platform as a document management system.
Yes.
So, Graham, could you share some examples of how your document management processes improve using Autodesk Docs?
Yeah, of course. So we've got a number of different ways that we've seen improvement. With the versioning, we don't need to supersede drawings anymore. So if anybody goes and looks at the document, they know that that's the latest version of that. And from an audit trail point of view, it's fantastic. So we can see the history of that drawing or that document, particularly in ACC now, where it's very quick. Click on the document, and you've got a version history that will say when it's been sent for an approval review, for example, or it's been looked at, or whether people have done markups or created issues on that drawing. So from that point of view, that's a big improvement. Using reviews, so where we now like approval processes and authorization on anything really, we're able to use those. So it saves something being emailed, somebody asking a number of different people, can you check this? Can you review a drawing, for example? Somebody then may mark that up in a PDF viewer or print it out, mark it up, and you can then end up with a number of versions of the same, for example, the same drawing, that somebody then has to collate that information into one place to do something with it. That's all time consuming, things get missed. It's challenging to manage. So the reviews processes are fantastic, and we've expanded that to a number of things. So where we need authorization for purchasing plant and equipment, that used to be 6 signatures on a piece of paper. We can now use the reviews to get authorizations, and it's much quicker, especially where people are now not sat in the same office. That's a much more efficient way of working. We can allow our supply chain, our subcontractors, directly into our projects. Using the permissions in the software is fantastic. We can give them very specific permissions to a very specific folder where they can put things like a technical submission. They can then put that to review themselves. They don't have to email it to our document controller, who's then got to put it on the system or on a server somewhere, and then email people around. So just using those basic functions of Docs saves us a lot of time, and it's really efficient way of working.
And you mentioned there around the supply chain and other members of the project. How easy do you find it to get them to sort of jump on board and actually utilise the software? Is it nice and straightforward?
Again, like everything else, there are challenges. There are some people that have got experience and have used it on other projects, and sometimes we will get asked, have you got ACC or have you got BIM 360? Can we have access? Other people are a little bit more challenging. Where we go and we'll speak to those guys, we will train them, we'll show them, actually, we're not, there's no big brother here. It's just we're trying to make everybody's life a lot easier. And then generally, they will get on board. We have people. It's not only from a document point of view. We have supply chain and subcontractors hosting their Revit models on our servers, for example. Sprinkler companies, a lot of them are quite happy to do that. It makes their life easier. We're not having to share our models and architecture models, for example, with them. They just get access to the latest models instantly, and that again is a huge time saver and an efficiency gain for everybody.
So speaking of models, obviously your role coming into the team where you joined Briggs Forrester a number of years ago now was obviously around that design team, and I know that your role's expanded to obviously be company-wide, specifically around Autodesk Construction Cloud. But I guess from that actual design team side, how can you talk a bit more about how your team's sort of workflows have improved using things like BIM Collaborate Pro, for example?
Yeah, so our Revit models when I started lived on our server. We didn't use Revit server or anything like that. We did start to then implement Revit server just as it became unsupported and defunct, if you like. Revit server wasn't the best solution that we needed. We then started to see, obviously, COVID, as we've already discussed, came along, but also the changes to Microsoft Server 2016, where they were taking snapshots of the state of the server every, I think it was 20 minutes or so. That caused a problem. So if somebody was synchronizing a model when that snapshot happened, you would quite often get a corruption. It would stop the connection. We were starting to face challenges like that. So from just a model management point of view, having BIM 360 Design as it was, BIM Collaborate Pro now, was massive for us. We saw less issues, fewer issues in terms of crashing, sync errors, that sort of thing. Just the speed of opening a model. Anybody that's ever worked on a Revit model, if it's a large Revit model, has sat for half an hour watching one open, synchronizing the same. We were experiencing issues where people wouldn't save and synchronize a model because of the time it took. That went away. So,
so could you explain why that is, in terms of how that speeds up the process around obviously the caching of that information?
Yeah, so the caching of the information is local to a person's C drive then. So the difference, I believe, between working on the server and working on BIM Collaborate Pro is it's only synchronizing the changes at any time rather than the whole model every single time you synchronize. So obviously you're dealing with megabytes or kilobytes of information rather than potentially hundreds of megabytes or even gigabytes of information. That's obviously faster. There's then, because we're dealing with smaller packets of information, there's less chance of an interruption in the service causing a corruption. Anybody that's had a sync interrupted will know that a Revit model can then become corrupt, and then
that's not what you want.
It's not what you want. And it usually happens on a Friday afternoon.
Absolutely. And I guess from the BIM Collaborate Pro side, obviously there's other features within collaboration, sort of the clash detection and so on. Are you making the most of any of the other features?
We are starting to use those now. So when we started looking at these solutions, the clash detection side of things was an extra subscription. Now that's included. We use that on a lot of our projects now. So the automated clash detection is fantastic in terms of we just have a number of views set up in our Revit models. We set them up as views for clash detection in BIM Collaborate Pro, and it runs for us. It makes life a lot easier. We would like to see some of those tools from Navisworks being able to specifically select things that come in, but from a model management point of view, it really is an effective way to keep on top of quality.
Graham, you've obviously then implemented Autodesk Build within Briggs Forrester too. So could you possibly just take us through maybe some of the benefits and changes that you've seen within your workflows as well by implementing that software?
Yeah, so like I said, the build element brings in the forms, but also includes things like issues and reviews as we have in docs. So those issues, what we found was it wasn't so much the efficiency that we were gaining in certain instances, it was the accountability. So having issues and reviews, especially issues, allows us to use those to direct tasks at people specifically. So rather than all that being lost in email traffic or a phone call or Teams. And again, this is not to try and keep tabs on people. It helps the individuals keep track of their own tasks or things that they need to do on projects. But it would also allows our users to assign those to other people so that they can, they can put dates on them, they can direct them specifically at the right person. And that's everything from a design review, a design change, to snagging on site. The issues tool really is a very useful function to our business.
How's that impacted on your quality and safety processes as well?
Quite a bit. So we've got things like our forms, quality management forms, health and safety forms. So we have a number of those. So we have weekly site safety walkarounds, we have monthly site safety walkarounds, and then obviously we have our QA forms for installation. We've done case studies on how we used to do these things and how we do them now, when we're saving a considerable amount of time. So our site supervisors, for example, rather than having to go out on site with a printed piece of paper from an Excel document or a Word document, fill out information, take photos, then go back to the site cabins, open Word on their laptop and start to compile all of that information into a report, they're able to do that out on site on an iPad or a mobile device, which is allowing them to spend more time out on site supervising. That has obvious implications for quality. From a health and safety point of view, again, we are able to gather information much more quickly and then also share and distribute information much more quickly. So quite often we have to share our health and safety findings with main contractors or builders or other client, for example. We can quickly create reports from the forms and share them very, very easily. From an auditability point of view, we are able to then audit the forms, we can audit documents, we can see and trace a history of anything really within the system. So when we get audited on ISO 9001, for example, we can demonstrate very easily, much more easily than we could previously, we are following our own procedures and standards.
And I suppose you don't have to just use that from an auditing perspective. You can also use it to give data-rich insights for your business moving forwards.
Absolutely,
be proactive rather than reactive, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we can leverage things like Power BI, for example, to find out where we are having consistent problems across multiple projects, across a region, across a project. There's the amount of information that we can now gather is we don't quite know what we're going to do with it all at the minute, but it's there. We can use it.
Better to have too much than too little, right?
Absolutely. So we can make informed decisions then, and we understand where we're having common problems. So that we can deliver training, or we can address the problems much quicker than we could previously.
Can you talk a bit about the actual impact it's had on your productivity and efficiency? Have you calculated some return on investment, or actually looked at how much time that this has saved you?
We have. So as we discussed previously, the initial business case was based on a number of things. So we've obviously then had to demonstrate that is the case. We went into quite a lot of detail into some of these areas. So for example, for BIM Collaborate Pro, for hosting our Revit models, when we were building the business case out, we actually sat and timed how long it took to open a Revit model, not just in one location, but I went and sat in a number of our offices. I went and sat in building sites. I opened different site models with different numbers of links in. Some of these models were upwards of like 4 gigabytes worth of Revit models, so they're large models. They would take an hour to open when you're sitting out on a building site with a quite a slow, limited internet connection, sitting in an office. Some of them, it was much quicker. However, there's still a lot of time spent sat watching a Revit model open. Everybody that's used it will know what that feels like. But not only did it for one person, we kind of worked out how often, how many times different users would interact, so open and synchronize their Revit models. So for example, a technician may open 2 models a day or 3 models a day. They may then synchronize. I would hope they would be synchronizing 10, 20 times a day. Whereas a design manager may open a model once, they may not even synchronize that. They may open it, look at something, close it. So we had a scale. We worked out people's hourly rates, their charge out rates to the business, and then worked out how long they were then potentially spending just sitting watching a piece of software open or save a model. We then had, through our trial project, our pilot project, we put those models into that project and did the same exercise on those models, and we saw significant gains in speed. So we had a large model that was taking upwards of an hour and a half to open on occasions, was down into 10 minutes, which is still a long time. However, that's a huge amount of time spent not being productive. And then the synchronizing of that model went down into a minute, from potentially anywhere from 20 minutes to half an hour at a time. So what we started to see then was people were actually synchronizing models more. They were saving their work more often. We weren't getting issues of models crashing and then people losing lots of work. So from a productivity point of view, the gains were massive, and also time saved is huge. Any time somebody's sat watching something happen, they're not being productive. It's costing them business money.
And did you look at anything else in terms of maybe opening drawings or time spent on site doing particular tasks?
Yeah, we have done. So again, our initial return on investment calculation was done on 2 things for our pilot project. Just finding documents. We did that. We based that on 5 minutes or so looking for a drawing, which we felt was conservative. However, when we actually run those numbers, the return on investment seemed too good to be true. So we had to, we made those numbers slightly more conservative to make them look more realistic. Again, there was an immediate potential time saving there. So we run the numbers on one person looking for one document a day. We potentially save hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a year on that. And as you scale that up for your business, if 200 people are looking for and opening 20 documents a day, the numbers in terms of time saved just in that are phenomenal. that doesn't take into account potential for working on the wrong documents, and we try to look at those calculations, but it's almost impossible to find a metric for that. And then we also looked at time spent reviewing documents. So there's a process there where somebody would create a document, they would send it to somebody else, generally via email, or they would send a link to that document. They would have to open it, mark it up, communicate any findings or issues with the team or with other people, and collating all of that information. So we put a time and a cost against that was that we felt appropriate for our business. I'm sure every business will be slightly different in the way they work. And then we tried the same thing using the reviews function in Docs, and again we saw an immediate reduction in time spent looking for the documents, compiling information, because everything was in one place. So you've got a document to review, it's in the reviews tab. All of the documents that are potentially in that review, so it could be like a ventilation drawing package, for example, all of the documents are in that one place. You can comment on them, you can mark them up, and then if you're the approver for that, it's a very simple approved, rejected, and that information flows back to the people that initiate that review. It's all self-contained, and it's efficiency, and not only that, it removes some of the potential for errors to creep in.
Absolutely, and I guess you speak there a lot around the money and sort of the bottom line savings that are potentially there around being able to either reduce people on projects or maybe just complete the project a bit quicker. Yeah. And I guess that does lead me to a question around, did you see any sort of improvements in your ability to meet deadlines on projects, or actually working with the clients, and did you see them that their sort of views of Briggs and Forrester improve because you're doing things better and more efficiently?
I think that's an inevitability of doing these things. Clients want to work with companies that are modernising and using modern methods of construction, modern technology. It's still a little bit too early in our process to put a defined cost and savings to that. And we don't see it about reducing the number of people. We see that the time saved is actually allowing our people to work better, to do more with the time that they have, rather than reducing the number of people that we've got on the project.
How have Man and Machine helped Briggs and Forrester both as a business and also implement Autodesk Construction Cloud?
So, Man and Machine have been with us since pretty much the start of this journey. Through yourself and Nathan initially, you've been there to offer support on whether. The first conversation is, shall we implement ACC now or not? So that was a long conversation that we had, whether the software was mature enough or whether the tools were ready for what we needed. We've had consultations, so you've been able to speak to our directors and so director level, user level, and everywhere in between of that. So from my point of view, Man and Machine have been great in terms of being able to speak to and deal with people from all aspects of our business. We've had support from you in terms of demonstrating software to different user groups, some of them more challenging than others. We've had a number of people from your business deliver training days, and we still do that across the business now, providing training, consultation. As the software grows and there's newer tools become available, you're demonstrating those to us, and demonstrating where the value to our business is. You're obviously vital to yourself in terms of getting the Build Unlimited deal across the line. From my point of view, that was essential for the journey in engineering services for us to implement what we are doing today.
And I suppose in the day-to-day, now that we've implemented the software, where do we help you along that journey? Is there support that the team offer?
We do. We have our technical support services, or your technical support services that we use, which are invaluable from our users day to day. Not only from the business that takes a load off of my work, so our users go directly to your technical services, which are fantastic. They're always helpful. I don't think we've yet provided you a challenge that you've not been able to resolve.
Good. And I guess coming away from Man and Machine, for you personally, if you were to speak with an organisation now looking to implement the Autodesk Construction Cloud, what one piece of advice would you give to them?
I don't think I could do it in one piece. there's a number of very, very key things. Top of that list is senior management and director level buy-in. They have to believe in what you are doing, and they have to really believe that it's the solution for them, whatever that solution is. They have to be fully bought in, and they have to deliver that message to the business. If they don't, then people underneath that, if they don't want to use it or they don't see the benefit, they have a reason not to do it. So the directors or senior management have really got to buy into it, and you've got to know as an individual, I do, that my directors have got my back, if you like. So there's that. Training, absolutely vital. I've seen in other organisations where they're trying to implement change and they will train 2 people that then they go and expect to train everybody else. That doesn't work. It simply can't, because those people have got a day job to do. They've only had basic training. Even if they've had advanced training themselves, by the time they've gone away and tried to implement it in their line of work, they've forgotten things, or they don't quite understand the detail behind how a piece of software or a solution works. So it's unfair on those to ask those people to then go and train the rest of the business. So training really is vital as well. And then I would say planning. Plan your rollout. Do not attempt to try and big bang, as it were. Learn from it. So small things, small steps, pilot project. Take on a couple of key aspects that you want to achieve, learn from it and develop it for the next solution. And it may take 2 or 3 years or longer. We are now in the 3rd year of this, and we're still learning, we're still changing, we're still developing. So if I was to try and do this in the space of 6 months in the 1st year, it would be very, very difficult, very challenging to do.
Brilliant. And I suppose finally, as a business then, what do you see as the biggest benefit to Briggs & Forrester?
As much as we've talked about efficiency, time saving and those sorts of things, I think accountability is the big takeaway. So we start to see that the system creates a solution where people become accountable for the tasks that they have to provide. It gives us metrics where we're able to track and trace what is going on a project on almost on a day-to-day basis, so we can see where there are bottlenecks, we can see where there are issues. We've got a full audit trail of all of our documents from a work in progress drawing through to it being issued for construction and then into an as fitted state. We can see the journey that document's gone on, and we can learn from that. As we've got metrics, we've now got 2, nearly 3 years worth of data sitting behind us that we can actually start to interrogate and find out where can we make our processes more efficient.
Great. Well, Graham, thank you very much for coming down and giving us your insights. It's really appreciated, and I hope everyone's found that useful. And certainly moving forwards, if you do have any questions or queries, please do feel free to reach out to Man & Machine. This is the first of the many case studies and sessions that we'll be looking to run over the course of 2023, looking at specifically the Autodesk Construction Cloud and our other portfolio of products as well. So please do keep your eyes peeled on the Man & Machine socials, certainly on our website as well. And thank you very much for watching.